right, so today we're doing the Heart of the Matter, Part 52. We're in, or I should say we're starting, the book or the letter to the Ephesians. And we're actually going to read the entire thing. So if you ever wanted me to do the letter to the Ephesians, now you're getting your wish. Because we're going to start in verse 1 and read the whole thing. Because chapter 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6 all reference the heart issues. But to get the context for all of those verses, we're pretty much going to have to read the whole thing. And so we're going to begin in verse 1. Shaul, an emissary of Yeshua Messiah, by the desire of Elohim, to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus and true to Messiah Yeshua. So we're going to begin in verse 1 with our context question. So who's speaking? Shaul. Who's he speaking to? The set-apart ones who are in Ephesus. This is really always, to me, a critical thing when you're studying to know who the audience is so that you have the right perspective. Because you know what? If it's those that should know or those that wouldn't know, that's something we should be aware of before we read. Because as we read, we have to know that context. Is the audience new, or are they expected to already know better or understand what Paul is talking about, what Shaul is talking about? This audience is to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus, and the ones who are true to Messiah Yeshua. So he's already setting the stage for who we're talking about. He says, favor to you and peace from Elohim, our Father and Master Yeshua Messiah. Blessed be the Elohim and Father of our Master Yeshua Messiah, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies in Messiah. Now, before I go further, so this is his greeting. Now, I'm going to use this as a quick chance to plug another teaching. I don't mind doing plugs even on a holy day because the teachings are free. But the teaching is the one on grace. Most translations have it say what? Grace to you and peace. Okay, so let's change that to what we all at least used to. Some of us still think grace means. So let's read that. Unmerited favor to you and peace from Elohim our Father. Does that make any sense? As a greeting to you? How about if we change that to merited favor to you and peace from Elohim? May you merit favor from Elohim. And so you may want to listen to that teaching called The Search for the Doctrine of Grace. Because I put forth my challenge to you, read all the verses where grace is and unplug the word grace and stick in unmerited favor and see just about every verse makes no sense if you do that. Okay? And so that's why it's in the greetings. The greeting says, I desire that you have merited favor. That makes sense. That's a proper greeting. It fits into the rest of the context. And peace, and blessed be Elohim our Father, who has blessed us with every spiritual blessing in the heavenlies and in Messiah, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be set apart and blameless before him in love, having previously ordained us to adoption as sons through Yeshua Messiah to himself, according to the good pleasure of his desire, to the praise of the esteem of his favor with which he favored us in the beloved, in whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of trespass according to the riches of his favor, which he has lavished on us in all wisdom and insight, having made known to us the secret of his desire according to his good pleasure, which he purposed in him. So, all of this is sounding very beautiful, very encouraging, very uplifting. See, before he's going to get into anything that may kind of cut them to the quick a little bit and kind of get their attention and wake them up, he wants to say, look, you were previously ordained to adoption. By the way, just because you were ordained to adoption doesn't mean that you're actually going to accept it, do it, and stay in it. But he knew who he was going to call when he was going to call them, is basically what he's saying. And he's saying, and you are among these people. You are already set apart. He's chosen you for now. You are for this time. So he's giving them all this encouragement. In verse 10, he says, all of this is to administer at that completion of time, to gather together in one, all in Messiah. This is what the Father's plan is, okay? He's making known his secrets in verse 9, and his whole idea is to bring at the completion of time to gather together in one, all in Messiah, both which are in the heavens and which are on earth in him, in whom also we did obtain an inheritance, being previously ordained according to the purpose of him working all matters according to the counsel of his desire. For us to be the praise of his esteem, those having first trusted in Messiah, in whom you also having heard the word of truth, the good news of your deliverance, in whom also having believed, you were sealed with a set apart a spirit of promise. Okay, he doesn't understand that a period belongs in there somewhere. I know the Greek doesn't have any punctuation. So what he's simply saying is he's trying to paint this picture of understanding the purpose of all this. Abba has had a plan. He has blessed you with an opportunity to be a part of that plan. And in this opening sort of prayer and blessing and whatever, that you want to call what Paul's doing here, what Shaul is doing here, he is going through the process of also kind of explaining to you a little bit about that plan. Because remember, he started off that these are the set apart ones, so you should understand that you are a part of a plan. And he gets into some of the detail is that this plan ultimately is to gather together in one, all in Messiah. And so we may want to look at that and understand that it could be referenced if you take the words in the right order or in a different order. Say, okay, he wants to gather together. You have all these that are in Messiah, but he wants to gather them all together because we have a lot that claim to be a Messiah and they're not all together. And he's saying, look, he wants to gather into one all who are of Messiah, or he can say he wants to gather all of them into Messiah. We can read it in both ways, and you know what? They're probably both right. Remember, Hebraically, a lot of things are and not or. We have an either-or mentality generally from that Greek mindset, but the Hebraic mindset is both. And so we're looking at this, and he says that there's also this good news. He says, and also this, well, actually, we'll go back a bit. He says, because for us to be a praise, because we have done what? We have trusted. He says, we have first trusted in Messiah. See, a lot of this stuff can kind of be a little tough to follow when you go in the beginning here. He goes, verse 4, he chose us before the foundation of the world. He previously ordained us to adoption. So we could easily fall into that idea of preordination or predestination that, hey, it doesn't matter what I do. It's been said, it's done, it's it. But whoa. What about verse 12? He says it's for us to be a praise or the praise of his esteem, those having first trusted in him. See, so now you got to take verse 12 and run your way back to verse 4 and 5 and say, okay, even though these things are preordained, it only worked out if you first trusted him. You see, if you're going to cherry pick and take some of the verses just out by themselves, you're going to miss something. And Shaul has this terrible habit, in my opinion, of explaining stuff later that he said first, instead of explaining it first and then saying it. So instead of telling us about those who trust in him, those who first trusted him get this stuff, boom, 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 boom. He says, no, this stuff was all foreordained because he knew he was going to call you. He already knew who he was going to call when. Everybody was going to be on a timing, and he knew the timing. However, it was not going to work out for you unless you trusted him, that you would trust in Messiah. And when I was going to kind of open up your mind a little bit with that to say, you know what, a lot of you know and truly believe that when you were in the mainstream of Christianity, you believe you trusted in Messiah. And you know what? On some levels, you probably did. But you didn't understand what is, in other places, Paul talks about others, what is the fullness of Messiah. Because Shaul, when he uses terms like this, in my opinion, expects you as a set-apart one who is true to Messiah to understand what the fullness is. He expects you to understand that he is the way, he is the truth, he is the life, he is the Word made flesh, he is the walking, talking Torah. And so he says, look, you have to first trust in him being all of that. Are you trusting in the truth? Are you trusting in the Word? Are you trusting in the Torah? Are you trusting in that he will bring life if you trust in him? Do you trust that he is the way to life? Or the way that leads to life or brings life? He says, first, This is for us to be the praise of his esteem, those having first trusted in Messiah, in whom you also, having heard the word of truth. So now we're kind of getting it tied into what I just said. The good news of his death, burial, and resurrection. Does it say that? No. The good news of your deliverance. The good news of your deliverance. I'm going to put forth that what he's talking about here is what they'd all been looking forward to. At least the Jewish community among them would have been looking forward, well, it's not the Jewish, the Israelite community, those that have been scattered into dispersion. By the way, it's already been a few hundred years of scattering. Okay, it's been a while since the scattering. Actually, it's been more than that. So they've had this time of scattering where they've been dispersed. And so, you know what? Not all of them even know they're Israelites anymore. They've lost they don't go to like genealogy.com or ancestor.com to figure out what they are, right? And he's saying, look, you've been looking forward to deliverance. That's the good news. And by the way, all the prophets had talked about the punishing, the dispersion, but also the deliverance. But normally in the churches, you're not hearing that's what the good news is. You're just not being told that. And so here is the good news that he's talking about. So the good news of your deliverance, in whom also, having believed, you were sealed with the set-apart spirit of promise. So interesting that the set-apart spirit of promise is not being told here that it's the one that you initiates and then does everything for you. It actually is the sealing. It seals you in some way. But you know what? You can also grieve that spirit. You could also reject it. You could also ignore it. He says, who is the pledge of our inheritance until the redemption of the purchased possession to the praise of his esteem. That's what's going on in that verse. He says, the set-apart spirit of promise that seals you is the pledge of our inheritance. In other words, it's simply a promissory. It's saying this is something that's in your future, provided that you do the other steps. It says it's a pledge until what? The redemption of the purchased possession. See, we are purchased. We're bought with a price. We've read other verses that say these things. You all know those verses, that you are bought with a price. You are a purchased possession. For this reason, I too, having heard of your belief in the Master Yeshua and your love for all the set-apart ones, do not cease giving thanks for you, making mention of you in my prayers, that the Elohim of our Master Yeshua Messiah, the Father of honor, would give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him, the eyes of your understanding being enlightened, so that you know what is the expectation of his calling and what are the riches of his esteem, of his inheritance in the set-apart ones. Let me stop there for a second. Because if we are to believe that this once saved, always saved, or predestination, or whatever it is that you want to look at, or that somehow when you've received the sealing of the set-apart spirit, there's really nothing for you to do, well, then why is he telling you that you need to have eyes of understanding and that your being be enlightened so that you know what is expected? Because I don't know that you were taught that in Sunday church, that there was anything that he expected in terms of specifics and details. Well, he expects you to love him. Okay, how? Anybody get the how taught to them? He expects you to love your neighbor. Okay, how? You know, I heard, and maybe it's true, maybe it's an urban legend of some sort, but I heard that back many, many years ago, missionaries, when they used to travel to places like the Far East, and they would have to travel by horse and by boat, and it would take months. And they would only be there for a period of time, leave, and they wouldn't come back for years sometimes because of all of the expense and the difficulty to travel. And I heard that the way the story plays out, that they went to this place and they taught them about Messiah. And they taught them all these things, and they left them with a bunch of New Testaments. And that was it. They came back a few years later to find that they had just gone back to the way, whatever they were doing. And they said, what happened? They said, well, we saw all this stuff that we were supposed to do, but there's nothing in here to tell us what to do and how to do it. Because that's all on the other side of the book. That's in the front half of the book, but they only were given the back half of the book. And so, of course, they're not going to have this going on when they're only getting the back half of the book. And so here he says, look, his prayer, this is his prayer. He says, I do not cease in giving thanks and making mention in my prayers. What am I praying? That your eyes of your understanding and your being be enlightened so that you know what is the expectation of this thing we just talked about called your calling. He's referring to this adoption, this process, this being preordained, etc., a calling. That you are called to a life, a very particular and specific way of life, a specific purpose of life, and that being that you would be discipled and that you would duplicate Messiah. In other words, that you would be transformed and conformed into that image. And so here we have him saying, look, you need this eyes. I'm praying that he give you this so that you know what's expected of you. How many of you have had that prayer yourself? Abba, I don't know what you expect of me. I know there's that verse we always go to in Deuteronomy 10:12. Of course, and that's a good verse to go to because Moses says the same thing. And now Israel, what does Abba expect of you? What does Yahweh expect of you? But to fear him, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve him, and to guard his commands. Now, of course, there was more in there where it says, with all your heart and with all your being. But you know what? That's not enough because those are still framework type ideas. Okay, how do I fear him? What's that all about? Walk in all his ways? What ways? Serve him in what capacity? Love him? I don't know how to do that. So just that list isn't enough. You know why? Because you need eyes of understanding. You need the eyes of your understanding being enlightened. You need to have the eyes of your understanding enlightened. And so that's why he calls teachers to share, and so that you can have your eyes enlightened. That's why he gives you the Ruach, the Spirit, to bring to remembrance what he gives you that is to enlighten. He gives you that teacher within you, so that when you have a teacher teaching you, the Ruach can confirm, and you can say, yes, that's what I've been looking for. Now I understand it. And that's when we find a lot of the stress disappears, because now we know what to do, and we know how to do it. But more importantly, we know what he expects of us. See, that's where Deuteronomy 8:2 comes into play. He does not expect you to be perfect. He expects you to make the effort to be perfect. He expects you to want to be perfect. He expects you to be disappointed when you're not perfect so that you'll stop, repent, make teshuvah, and then go back to trying to be perfect. You see, but a lot of you have heard people tell you that he expects you to be perfect. He doesn't expect you to be perfect. He knows, okay, he's much smarter than we are, and he knows that you're going to mess up. He knows how hard it is to live in this world with Hasatan and all the other things going on in this world. But he expects you to try. Not just try a little bit. He uses words like utmost, with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your being. He expects you to put everything into this. Did you really try as hard? You know, sometimes a parent watches a child, and the child is crying, and you say, sweetheart, why are you crying? And the child failed at something. Something didn't work, and it broke, or just whatever. And so you say to the child, did you try as hard as you could? Did you give it your full try? And the child says, yes. And you say, then it's okay. We'll learn from this, and we'll do it again. And hopefully this time, it'll be better. It'll be right. But I'm proud of you because you tried with all that you could. You gave it your all. And my question to you is, and only you know the answer to this, are you really giving it your all? Or are you just deceiving yourself and everybody around you, trying to convince them you are? Because you know what? Doesn't matter. He knows. He knows. And that's really the huge question of this whole thing here is, are you doing it? Are you giving it your all? if he gives you the eyes, or should I say that he has your eyes given that understanding so that you can be enlightened, what are you doing with that? I mean, just because you're enlightened doesn't mean you're going to do anything with it. It's great to be enlightened, but it goes back to kind of the old saying of, knowledge is power. No, it's not. It's information, unless it's applied. There's no power in knowledge. I can teach you all kinds of things about auto mechanics, so you know how to fix everything about a car and informationally, but unless you go out and do something with it, there's no power in that. It's just information, right? I could do that with any subject you can think of, and that knowledge does you no good whatsoever unless you go to apply it. And so here he's saying, look, he says that in his prayer is that the Elohim of our Master Yeshua Messiah, the Father of esteem, the Father of honor, would give you a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of him. Now, when you see that word knowledge of him in that kind of a phraseology, it implies a whole lot more deep intimacy. It's not just that you know who he is or you know about him, but that you know him. Have you ever said to anybody who thought something of you that was wrong or whatever, said, I thought you knew me? I said, if you knew me, you would never think I would do that. I thought you knew me better than that. Or you may say to somebody, I thought I knew you. Because they do something that you then look at them like, I can't believe you did that. I thought I knew you better than that. It's not informational. It's relational. Because it's way beyond and more than just information. And he says, I want you to have a spirit of wisdom and revelation, which means that it be revealed to you, these things, through relationship with him. But do you understand that what you do affects whether or not you're in even relationship with him? Words don't put you into relationship with him. Actions do. What you do. I mean, you could tell me you love me. You could tell me you're my best friend. You could tell me anything. But I'm going to watch and see how that actually looks. And then I'll know if you actually love me or respect me or whatever it is that you said. Your words. How many times you had a problem with somebody and they're saying all the right things, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, whatever. That's just words. I want to see action. Anybody ever do that? Of course. And if you haven't, you've heard someone say it to you. That's where we get this the whole thing with walking the talk. You just talking the talk, or you're going to walk the talk. And he's saying here, look, I want you to have a spirit of wisdom and an understanding revealed to you through the knowledge and relationship with him that you would have, so that the eyes of your understanding, being enlightened, through what? Through that relationship, revelation in the spirit of wisdom, you would know what the expectation is of your calling. Now hold on a second. He's not talking to brand new people here. He's talking to the set-apart ones who are in Ephesus and those who are true to Messiah Yeshua. Yet even they needed to hear this. So this is for those of you that maybe think, well, I've arrived on some level. But you still need to hear this. Because maybe you haven't arrived as much as you thought you have. He says because you need to know what the expectation is. So what he's saying here is he doesn't think they know. He's thinking that they've taken it for granted or they've only known it in part, that they really don't actually know, like in fullness, what that expectation is. And I'm going to give you the synopsis in my opinion. The expectation is that you completely make a full effort with your utmost to duplicate yourself into the image of Yeshua. That's the expectation. That you will conform and mold yourself into that image. That you will take that mind of flesh and take it and let the mind of Yeshua replace that. That's Philippians 2:5. Let this mind be in you that was in Messiah Yeshua. That you would take this body and mold it into a behavior style that matches Yeshua's. But you know what? You can't do that unless you know what he did. Which is why we have a teaching called, What Did Yeshua Do? Because I love in Christianity, they had all this excitement over what would Jesus do, right? Those bracelets, WWJ. They didn't know what he would. How do you know what he would do? We know what he did. Who are you to think you know what he would do in a given situation? I want to focus on what I know he did and then learn from that and learn how to duplicate the mindset that you would need to have to do what he did. What kind of mindset would you have to say, forgive them, Father, they know what they don't know what they're doing, while they're scourging him and spitting on him and killing him? You can't even say that about the person who cut you off in traffic, because you want to speed up and cut them off and then slow down. These people were killing him. And he said, they don't know what they're doing. But you're thinking, oh, that person who cut me off knew what he was doing. Yeah, but of course, he knew he was driving and that he was cutting you off. But he didn't understand that he was not thinking, I'm going to now be obnoxious and rude. He was thinking, I'm in a hurry, I'm trying to get someplace. He wasn't thinking about you. Can we agree that that's most likely the case? I mean, sure, there's probably a few people out there that are thinking, I'm going to go out there and be a jerk and annoy everybody. That's probably true. But he's saying, look, you need to know what is the expectation of your calling. He expects you to try with all your might, with all your strength and all your being, to love him and to love your neighbors yourself and to embrace what he's laid out before you, what he's offered you. And he says here, and what is the expectation, what is the exceeding greatness of his power? This is now in verse 19. I'm sorry, let's go back to 18. It says, not only should you know the expectation of his calling, but you also are, and what are the riches of the esteem of his inheritance in the set-apart ones. He wants you to understand what it is that's your kind of the carrot out there. Why are you doing this? He wants you to know, why would you go through all of this? What's the point? There is a huge point. Deliverance from all of the things that are plaguing you. Deliverance from stress, fear, and all the other stuff that's just destroying your emotions and your health and your life. A world eventually ruled by Mashiach, where there is no more fighting, no more war, no more strife. Every tear is wiped away by the Almighty himself, so to speak, right? He says, and what is the exceeding greatness of his power toward us who are believing according to the working of his mighty strength? So he wants you to understand these things, which he wrought in the Messiah when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenlies, far above all rule and authority and power and mastery, and every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in that which is to come. And he put all under his feet and gave him to be head over all, to the assembly, which is his body, the completeness of him who fills all in all. And by the way, that's just his opening statement. Because now he's going to start dealing with the issues. But he wanted to give everybody who was going to read this in Ephesus an understanding. He says, look, I understand who you are. You're called. You're set apart. For the most part, you're those who are true to Messiah. He says, I'm praying that you really fully, because remember, at the starting point, you can be all those things. You get excited, you start learning, you start opening your eyes, opening your ears, opening your heart. And yes, you could qualify for these descriptions, but then he says, but you need to have your eyes, the eyes of your understanding opened so you can be enlightened. So you can really, truly embrace his expectation for you. Because we don't. We just truly don't. Because why do we do some of the things that we do? Well, because we really don't embrace what he's offered us. We don't understand how disappointing that is to him. And so now we get to chapter 2. He says, and you were dead in trespasses and sins. So you were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the ruler of the authority of the air, of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. So here he's now giving them the, let's talk about where you came from speech. Because he already told them, this is where you are now. I know this is where you are now. But you came from somewhere. He says, you were dead. In other words, your trespasses had earned you death. As a matter of fact, your life might have been a whole lot like The Walking Dead. It was going nowhere fast. You were miserable and you were suffering and you were just going. And he says, and basically, this is because you once walked according to the course of this world. This is all because you walked according to the rule of authority of the air, Satan, and of the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. There's an attitude, an approach. And by the way, when it says the spirit that is now working, it's not talking about an entity. There is an approach, a mindset, an attitude that is working in one that ends up being disobedient. For the most part, it's self-sovereignty. We've talked about this every week. Because the biggest problem is you wanting to be in charge of you. And it's hard to tell you that being in charge of you is dumb. Because after all, I know me better than anybody. Well, no, you don't. He knows you better than that. But still, I should be in charge of me. I know what I like. I know what I don't like. I know what I can do and what I can't do. So why shouldn't I be in charge of me? And he says, well, we have other things we've taught you as far as having your being enlightened and the eyes of your understanding light. We've told you, this is Abba, I'm speaking for him for a second, just metaphorically here, not literally. He says, I've taught you that it's not in man to even know where to put his feet. I've taught you that the way that seems right to a man leads to death. So, yes, trying to be in charge of you and rule you is kind of dumb. But we get offended by that, so we decide we're not going to listen. We're going to be in charge of ourselves. He calls this the spirit that is now working in the sons of disobedience. It's my interpretation. It's the attitude, I know better. I know what's right for me. Why should I listen to you? He says now, the sons of disobedience, he says, these are those among whom we also once lived. We lived amongst those guys. Not only did we live amongst them, we were one of them. He says, amongst whom we once lived in the lusts of our flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath as also the rest. So again, if you remember what we talked about just recently in part, say 50 or 51, etc., going through Romans, maybe 49, I don't remember how far back to go, but in Romans we were talking about this law of sin and death that rules in our members, that rules in our bodies. It's that same thing he's talking about here in verse 3. He says, this thing that's ruling in you by basically you deciding to rule yourself, which means you're guided now by your lusts of the flesh, the desires of your flesh and of your mind. He said, in that place that you were, by nature, you were really children of wrath, not children of Elohim. But you were children of wrath. He says, but Elohim, who is rich in compassion, because of his great love with which he loved us, even when we were dead in trespass, made us alive together with Messiah. By merited favor, you have been saved. In other words, you showed, let's go back, he says, this all over here came because you first trusted in Messiah. That merited some favor. That merited, in other words, he approved of that. It was pleasing to him. That's what merited means, that you've done something approved or pleasing to the one that you're meriting the favor from. In other words, if I've done anything that's pleasing in your sight, that you appreciate, that you liked at all, I'd appreciate some favor in this situation. That's what Jacob was asking Esau. He said, Esau, if your servant has done anything, don't kill me, basically. All right? We go back to the law of first mention. The first mention of grace is in Genesis 6:8 with Noah. After all, the whole world did not merit favor, right? He said, everybody's sinning. They're all doing whatever they want. Nobody's listening. I'm going to wipe them all out. Oh, but there's one. And because he didn't merit anything, I'm going to pick him. Is that what we're to believe? But later we're told because he was the righteous one within his generation. So he merited that favor to be selected and put in the ark. And there is a Hebraic concept of the law of first mention, which says wherever something is mentioned the first time, tells you an incredible amount about what that means and how it's generally going to be used from that point forward. And so the first place we hear anything about grace is in Genesis 6:8. That's the word chen. And so here he's saying through all of this, he says, look, he said, even when you were dead in trespasses because you were walking in the foolishness of your mind, you were doing this lust of the flesh, you were just, whatever you wanted, you did. If you didn't want it, you didn't do it. It didn't matter if it was right or wrong so much. It mattered if you thought it was right or wrong. I'm not saying you didn't care about right and wrong. You just cared about it through your own personal filters. You got to decide if it was right or wrong. He says, yet Elohim, in his rich compassion, because of his great love with which he loved us, even under those conditions, when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together through Messiah. By merited favor you've been saved. Because he called to you and you merited favor by responding. And you responded by saying, Abba, I trust you. I'm going to step out in faith, in belief, in trust. And I'm going to see that I want you to see that I trust that this will work. See, fear and doubt, not going to work. Doesn't merit any favor. That's kind of a default position for us anyway, to be in fear and doubt. I mean, don't you see that in your own life? That you're afraid of things? Mostly you're thinking and you're nervous, and that's all fear. And you worry, that's fear and doubt. But we're supposed to have a sound mind, not the spirit of fear, but a sound mind. One that has shalom. But not just peace, but peace that goes beyond understanding. The peace that only can come from above. So he continues, he says, and he raised us up together and made us sit together in the heavenlies in Messiah Yeshua in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding riches of his favor and kindness towards us in Messiah Yeshua. Now we're getting a slight contrast in here between grace and kindness. He did these things out of kindness. And by the way, he called you in your sin before you merited anything. That was in his mercy and his compassion. But the favor came when you responded. Do you understand that? You deserved nothing. You had earned nothing. You had merited nothing. And he called you in that state. We don't call that grace. The church does. That's really unmerited favor, which is compassion and mercy. That's stuff we give those that really don't deserve anything. But because we believe in them, because we know there's a potential there, we offer them that opportunity. They haven't shown anything necessarily, but he knows us on a deeper level. He knows what you can and will do if given the opportunity. And so he gives it to you. But we're free to do what we want with it once he gives it to us. So what are we doing with it? So he says here, in order to show, he did all of this stuff in order to show in the coming ages, which is kind of like now, okay, the coming ages, the exceeding riches of his favor and kindness. So he gave them favor, so people would see, look at the kindness he gave them because they first trusted. Because they would trust me. Because really, when he brought them out of Egypt, did they really do anything to merit that? No. As a matter of fact, in the Exodus account, we hear him say, by the way, you're not getting all of this for anything you've done. You have not earned this with your righteousness. This is because I happened to promise a guy named Abraham and his son named Isaac and his son named Jacob. Just so you know. That's kind of what Yahweh was saying to them. By the way, just so we're clear, this has nothing to do with you. You did not do anything to get me, to do this for you, because you deserve this in some way. Or you're special. Oh no, if you agree to this, I'm going to make you special, but you're not already special. Meaning special above others. I don't want people misreading this. We're all special in that he made us. But I mean, when you compare one group of people to us, I said, I'm going to make you a special people. I'm going to highly exalt you above the other nations, but not because of what you did up to this point, but because of what I expect you to do from this point going forward. because you made a promise, a covenant, to follow and obey, because you're supposed to have done this first step, which is in here, because you trusted me. They were supposed to trust him. Because you know what? Why did Abraham get the promise in the first place? Because he trusted him. He said, because you trusted me, because you were willing to offer your son. These are things I'm promising to you because there was trust. Because when he said, Abram, and he said, hineni, here I am, and he said, I need you to go. He said, no problem. Why? Because I trust you. Did he know where he was going? Nope. Didn't ask any questions either, did he? Well, if he did, it's not recorded. So as far as we know, he didn't ask any questions. It was just sort of, sir, yes, sir. That's kind of what the hineni means. It's like, here I am. What do you want me to do? I'm on my way. My feet are ready. I'm just, what it is. Tell me, I'll go. See, but we are not like that. We are like, where are we going? How long is it going to take? What am I going to do when we get there? And we're asking all these things because we're not sure we want to go. We're not sure that we're going to like it. We're not sure. You know, theoretically with Sukkot, if you are being told and called to come to this Sukkot, or any other one, but a particular Sukkot, you shouldn't need to call and find out what the activity schedule is like. You shouldn't need to call to find out anything, because you're following and trusting him. It's not about, well, what if I don't like it? What if they're doing things? Get out of the way of all that. Maybe you're not supposed to like all that stuff. Maybe you're just supposed to be there because you were supposed to serve. Maybe you're supposed to be there because there's going to be that one person that either you needed or needed you. And the rest of it could be nothing. But if you feel led and drawn to something, and you really are confident it's him, hineni. Hineni. Don't ask so many questions. Now, if it's just informational because you're just curious, sure, ask all the questions you want. But it's a difference between getting information because you're curious and getting information because it's going to affect your decision. Because if that's what you're doing, then it's not Abba yet. You have not trusted, or you're just not sure that he wants you to do it. That making sense? These are all heart issues. Now, we haven't really talked about the word heart so much, but this is all heart issues. And so here we are going through this, and you understand that when he calls you and delivers you out of all this ignorance and everything else, at some point he's going to lead you to do certain things, to go certain places, and you need to be ready to say, hineni. Even just coming out of the churches. Did you understand Torah when you first came out of the church? Nope. But a lot of you have come into Torah observance and you're not ready to say hineni. You know, I'm not doing that till I understand it. I hear that all the time. Hey, how come you're not doing this? Well, I don't understand it, so I'm not doing it. I said, where exactly is that verse that says you have to understand it to do it? Anybody know where that verse is? I don't know where that verse is. Maybe I missed it somewhere. All you need to understand is that it came from him. And if you know who he is, which is why he over and over again, you'd think he wouldn't have to do it. Tells you, by the way, I'm the one who made the heavens and earth. I'm the one who set the mountains in their place. I created the sea. Do you know who I am? And you're sitting there going, no, do you know who I am? Yeah, you're nothing. I hate to burst your bubble or make you depressed, but compared to him, you're nothing. But with him and in submission to him, in duplicating him, you can be something. But you just being you, nothing. You being him, something. Is it making any sense? So you got to decide, do you want to be something? Stop trying to do it on your own efforts and power, meaning I want to do it my way. You want to put effort and power into something? Put that effort and power into doing what he wanted. And stop arguing with him. Stop saying, I need to understand. Now, that's not to say that you don't want to understand, but I promise you, most of the understanding happens in the doing. I'll give you an example. When you first learned about Shabbat, I'm sure most of you thought of it as, so it's just a different day. Whatever I was doing on Sunday, now I'm doing on Saturday. Who cares? It's just a different day. But then when you started keeping Shabbat and keeping it more fully, in terms of the whole day. And then you started keeping it the whole day and realizing Isaiah 58 was kind of relevant in this, the last two verses, where it talks about not even your thoughts and not even your words, but his thoughts, his words, to focus on his desires and pleasures on that day. And when you started doing those things, even if you don't understand them, amazing things happened on that day for you. Your life changed. Now, how do you explain that to anybody so that they can understand before they do it? If you came to me and said, well, what's the big deal with keeping Shabbat? You know what? I can't tell you, because if I tell you, you won't believe me anyway. Would you? The only thing you can, and by the way, the very first time, remember, I was raised Jewish, but we didn't keep Shabbat in our house. It was sort of more of a cultural, secular Jewish type of thing. So when I was in college, and I went to the rabbi in college, and I was trying to figure out this whole vertical connection thing, which I wasn't really raised with, although I did go to Hebrew school, and I was bar mitzvah and all those things, but I was not taught much about the vertical connection. And I asked the rabbi where to start, because I said, I want to check into this, and I don't know where I'm going to end up. I had a lot of very Orthodox, conservative, other Jewish friends, but I also had a lot of born-again and other denominational Christian friends who were very serious about their beliefs. And I wasn't. I wasn't raised with it. And so I was trying to figure it out. And you know what the rabbi did? He gave me a little booklet. He says, start here. And it was just a small paper-bound booklet on the Sabbath, on Shabbat. And in reading it, you know what it said? It said, well, I'm going to explain all this to you, but it said, but you're not going to understand it till you do it. It actually said that in the book. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I took that next Saturday, and I did nothing. I didn't work. I actually went for a walk. It was a beautiful day, walked to the park, and just tried to connect vertically and try to be open to whatever he wanted. It was incredible. And the guy was right. But he couldn't explain that in the book. Well, the same thing here. This goes back to that knowing, right? That knowing him comes in the doing and the experiencing and the interaction. See, if it's not in your heart, to hineni, which says, I'm going to do it even if I don't understand it, because all you need to understand is who said it. All you have to understand is the I said it, you do it covenant. And if you trust that, if you have covenanted that, who are you to say, well, I'm not doing it if I don't understand it? All that's saying is, in my self-sovereignty, I really don't want to do it. So I'm going to sit back until I can find anything to justify not doing it, because really I don't want to. Isn't that true? Isn't that really what it's all about? We still are doing those things because really, ultimately, I'm not interested. I don't want to do it. That's why you don't keep Shabbat the way you should, or all the time. That's why you don't go to all the feasts. That's why you don't take off from work when you're supposed to. That's why you don't wear your seat. That's why you don't. I can go down the list. I know a lot of men out there still are not wearing their seat. You know why? Because they don't want to. They'll give you lots of excuses. Forget all that. The real truth is they don't want to. They don't want to. Why? Because I'm a guy. That looks ridiculous. I mean, fringes and frilly things on my clothes. I'm a man. I drink beer. I watch football. I go hunting. I got to wear this? Come on. I wear it because he said so. Now, after wearing them for many years, I don't think I'd feel comfortable getting dressed without them. But that's only because I've worn them, and I understand what it means to wear them. To me, what it means to me to have them on. I don't wear them like I did at first, like, all right, he said to, and I'm going to just put them on, and I don't understand all this, but I'll do it because he said so. Right? That's kind of the attitude that we have. I don't even know what to do with them, how to put them on. I have no idea. Somebody show me what to do. As a matter of fact, we do give away to the people we interact with that we know. If you've never had a set, we will give you a set. We'll give you your first set. Except, I don't want you to just put it in a drawer. Don't ask me for a set just because it's free. If I give it to you, put it on. Then otherwise, don't ask me for it. Well, I don't understand. I know you don't understand. Do you know that he said it? Yeah. Well, then do it. I mean, look, let's just maybe we just got to be real clear. Let's read in Exodus just so we're very clear, because, I mean, I guess people just don't understand. In Exodus 19, I don't remember there being anything about understanding it. He says, look, he says, hey, Moses. That's not what Yahweh said. Okay, Moshe, in verse 3 of chapter 19, he goes up to Elohim. Okay? And he says, look, I want you to say this to the house of Yaakov and declare this to the children of Israel. You have seen what I did. See, he starts off with, you know who I am. In a much more real way than we do, because they saw it. Right? He says, you know who I am. You saw what I did to the Mitzrites. And you saw how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you out to myself. And now, here's the deal. This is the covenant that everybody's always talking about, covenant. Ready? This is it right here. It's very complicated. You need an attorney to help you walk through it. Small print, big words. Here it is. And now, if you diligently obey my voice and shall guard my covenant, then you shall be my treasured possession above all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a reign of priests and a set-apart nation. That's it. Really complicated, right? He says, that was the end of it. He says, those are the words you ought to speak. That's the covenant. Now, what he actually expects you to diligently obey is his voice, which means anything he says, he expects you to do, and not just do, but do it diligently. Why don't we do it diligently? We got heart problems, okay? Because my heart's just not in it, so I'm not going to do it diligently. I'm doing it because he's making me do it. And your heart's wrong. Because you haven't really embraced, do you know who I am part? Because if you embraced the who he is part, you would do it diligently. Because you would not only believe what you know he did, but you would have total confidence in what he said he's going to do. Which is the whole point of the book, having so much history in it, so that you can know this is who you're dealing with. This is who you're dealing with. Wow, the whole thing was simply, if you diligently obey my voice and guard my commands, I'm going to give you this stuff, and that's it. That's like 3 sentences. And so Moses came and called the elders together and said it before them. And you know what they said? In verse 8, all that Yahweh has spoken we shall do. Now at this point, all Yahweh had spoken was that you need to do what he says. He hadn't said anything in terms of the commandments yet. That doesn't come until chapter 20. We're in 19. He's looking for them to do what? What it says in Ephesians. Because these are those having first trusted. See, it all begins with you first trusting. That's a heart issue. Well, I don't know if I can trust you. We got a heart problem. Or I trust you implicitly. That comes out of your heart. See, part of the covenanting of marriage has to do with 2 people saying, I trust you with me, everything that is me. And I want you to trust you with me so that you can give that to us so you know I will be there for you. So can you give yourself fully to me? By the way, I'm facing my wife saying all this. So if you're wondering, why is he looking that way? Okay, but that's that whole thing. Can you trust me and can I trust you with each other? That's a pretty deep covenant. We talk about the covenant being like the marriage covenant. We're looking forward to the renewing of the covenant at what we call the wedding feast. Yeah, but you know what? A marriage, if your heart's wrong, isn't going to work. If your heart's not right, if you don't truly trust, and you're not committed to make yourself worthy of that trust, see, we don't have to worry about him. He is trustworthy. You, on the other hand, the jury's out. To be honest, right? Now, he knows you can. It's a question of whether you will. He called you because he knows you can, that you're capable. But will you? It's up to you. Trust issue. And so when you go through these verses, and we should be understanding as we go through these verses that this is all predicated on the covenant. And the covenant simply was, whatever you say, we'll do. By the way, I didn't see anything that said, after I've explained it fully and you appreciate it and understand it and agree to it, then you have to do it. No. He said, you agree that if it comes out of my mouth, you do it. And diligently please. Well, actually, there was no please in there. That was it. Just diligently. If you agree to diligently obey my voice, I'll take care of you like you never could have imagined. Because it says that eye has not seen, nor has it even been in the heart of man to even fathom what he's got in store for you. Do you trust that? Do you believe that? Is your behavior proof that you trusted and believed that? Is there evidence in watching you behave that that trust level is there, that belief level is there? I don't know. I have no idea where we left off. In chapter 2 somewhere. Okay? But let's understand, as we're going through this here, he says, look, he raised us up together, verse 6, and made us to sit together in heaven. Okay, in order to show in the coming ages the exceeding richness of his favor and kindness, etc. Okay. Verse 8, for by favor you have been saved, through belief, and not of yourselves, it is a gift of Elohim. Now, we have a bunch of stuff mixed together in here. It says it's not by works so that no one should boast. What he's saying here is this, look, by merited favor, you are saved through belief. In other words, by belief, you take action. That merits favor. But he says, but it's not the actions just in themselves, so you can boast that somehow my doing this made him save me. In other words, he owes me now because of what I did. He says, no, I offered this as a free gift. You chose to accept it and then take action. Do you follow that through? It's not exactly the way you were taught on Sunday. He says, look, because that belief matches up with James when he says, I will show you my belief by my actions. But he's talking about this boasting. So he says, well, we can't want works because works is about boasting. No, he's saying you can't say to Abba, you owe me, you have to let me in. Look at what I did. He says, no. I offered you an opportunity to be in, expecting you to do so that you get in. There's an expectation there. He says, it's not the other way around. And by the way, if you don't do it with the right heart, with the right attitude, with the right approach, the mechanics of it is irrelevant. You're not going to get to sit there on Judgment Day going, I kept the Sabbath. I didn't eat any pork or shellfish and stuff, and I did this and I did that, and then, you know what? But he can still look at you and say, yeah, but you're still an obnoxious jerk. Why would I want to live with you forever? Oh, no, I got my checklist. You got to let me in. No, I don't. He doesn't have to let you in because you have a little checkbox. The checkbox is one checkbox. Have you transformed and conformed into the image of the Son? Another way I've put it over the years is, have you become the type of person he wants to live with forever? And it's not just works. And Yeshua explained that in his very first message when he said, of old where it says there's this work called murder, and I told you not to do that particular thing. He says, well, you know what? Just because you've checked off that box and you haven't killed anybody, that's not enough. See, that's boasting by works. Well, I didn't kill anybody. I know, but you wanted to badly. You thought about it all the time. You talked about how much you wanted to kill that guy, how much you hated them. Well, who wants to live with that person forever? Sure, he checked off the box, never broke that commandment. What about the one who, he said, well, there's an adultery commandment. And hey, you've got that box checked. You have never done that. You've never committed adultery. It's on your list. Check. Oh, but boy, you sat there looking out the window, lusting after or driving around or whatever you did, you were lusting after that person and wanted her or him or whatever it was. And this is the same thing Yeshua says. This is breaking the commandment. Would you want to spend forever with people like that? Would you? Neither would he. But yet, this is the boasting thing. The person could say, but I never did it. Check. You could keep Shabbat begrudgingly. You could keep the feast begrudgingly. In other words, I'm here. And they sit there, oh, it's over, good. I'm going to go home now and do what I want. Would you want to spend forever with somebody like that? And so he's saying here, look, salvation and faith and works are kind of synergized. That's what the teaching that they called Are You Saved? And he's trying to say, look, by favor, you have been delivered. And we can even just take that as pure favor. He says, look, he has chosen to give you this free gift of deliverance. So let's say you were in total ignorance. Actually, we could all say that. We were all in total ignorance. And then he called you. He opened up your eyes and your ears and your heart, and you started getting enlightened in your being. And then he says, but through belief, you are saved. So there's more than just him just delivering you. Just like the person who came to Yeshua, and there were thousands of them, who were healed, and what did he say to every one of them? Your faith or your belief has made you well. So now let's see, were there any works involved? Oh, you bet. They had to get up and go to him. That was a work. It was an expression of their belief. They didn't just sit there in the house going, I know Messiah can heal me, and he's down the road. They got up and went over there, which was an act of faith and belief, and that's a work. And they went to him and said, I know you can do this. You are the Messiah. That's a work. It's the three-dimensional expression of a belief. When you obey him, it's because you believed what he said. See, that's a three-dimensional expression of your belief. When you don't obey him, it shows you really didn't believe what he said. You didn't take him at his word. And so he goes, look, but it's not of yourselves, it's a gift of Elohim. In other words, he made this salvation available as a free gift. But your belief is what makes it work. And it said, but it's not the works itself, so that you can boast and say, look at how great I am, I did all these works. There's a lot going on in just those two sentences. He says, for we are his workmanship created in Messiah Yeshua unto good works. There you go. See, if you keep going forward, again, that's how Paul seems to work. If you can go far enough forward, he explains what he meant. You were, listen, he says, this is happening, he says, because you are his workmanship created in Messiah for what? Unto good works, which Elohim prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Therefore, remember that, now, by the way, if you were not saved or delivered that free gift, if that had never happened, you would not then be free to choose to walk in them. And what? Walk in what? The covenant. Doing what he said. That's what you're now free to walk in. Because until then, you are over here in the spirit of disobedience that's now working in the sons of that spirit, that self-sovereignty. We're back in verse 2. You were there. He's contrasting these things. But while you were there, you know what he did? He delivered you out of all that fleshly mess so that you could choose to covenant, which is obedience. And it's not just any kind of obedience. It's trusting obedience. The trust of Abba says, you want to know how trust is? I want you to agree you have no idea what I'm going to say, to just do whatever I say. That's trust. I want you to agree to do anything I say. You're agreeing that anything that comes out of my mouth, you're going to do it. Wow. You got to trust. But he's also said, but if you do, you also have to trust that I will raise you up to be this people above all peoples, my cherished possession. See, you guys want the one, but don't want to do the other. But you can't have one without the other. You don't get all of that good stuff unless you do the other part, which is being willing to trust him and obey his voice. And guess what? All of that is a heart issue. Because all that trust and faith versus that fear and doubt is all fighting in your heart, where the emotions are. As we're going through this, we have to understand that this is what's going on. But listen, he created you unto good works. So now remember in verse 11, he says, therefore remember that you once were Gentiles in the flesh. In other words, Gentiles are those outside the camp without the covenant. He said you were once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hands. He's saying the Jews called you Gentiles. Let's all change the words into like real regular English, so to speak. He's saying, straight talk, the Jews called you Gentiles. Okay? This is not about circumcision. It's simply about two groups of people being identified. He says, you were called Gentiles by the Jews. He says that at that time, listen now, at that time you were without Messiah. Messiah is the word, the truth, the way. You didn't have Torah, right? So as a Gentile, you don't have Torah. The nations don't have Torah. So they don't have Messiah. They don't have the truth. They don't have the word. They don't have life. He said you were without Messiah and excluded, because without Messiah, you are excluded from the citizenship of Israel. Because Israel is what they call the people of the living Elohim. So you're either Gentile or Israel. That's what he's saying right here. He said, you were Gentile, so therefore as a Gentile, you were excluded from being Israel. Why? Because you didn't have Messiah. And strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. See, you were in a place where you had no expectation. You didn't know anything. You were just living life. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Whatever, right? He says, but now, he says, now in Messiah Yeshua, you who were once far off. In other words, there was a separation between you and him, have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. Now, what separates you from Elohim? Sin. So here they were doing all these fleshly, worldly sin things, non-Torah things, non-righteousness things, which had them afar off. He says, but by the blood of Messiah, you were forgiven of these things, which brought you near, so that you can now covenant. He said, for he is our peace, who has made both one, and having broken down the barrier of partition, having abolished in his flesh the enmity. So now he's abolishing in flesh the enmity, but Paul tells us in Romans that enmity is the law of flesh, of the sin and death fleshly thing versus the righteousness. In other words, your normal default disposition and spirit and focus is that enmity to his. But he's abolished in the flesh the enmity. He didn't abolish the Torah. The Torah wasn't the problem. You didn't have that. Follow it back a few verses. There's nothing in here that said they had Torah and that was the problem. It was not having Torah that was the problem. He goes, then there's a little thing in hyphens here, whatever, they say, the Torah of the commands and dogma. He abolished in the flesh the enmity, the Torah and the commands of dogma, so as to create in himself one renewed man from the two, thus making peace. You know, that little piece about the Torah, the commands, look, in there, we can get all kinds of things. We can say, abolish in the flesh the enmity. Well, you know what? The Torah of command said that when you're in the flesh and you're not in the Torah, there's an enmity situation. He said, but if you come through me, we can reconcile that and make it peace. That's not picking on the Torah. And he also could be talking about the fact that there was this whole thing in the society at that time, this animosity, this enmity between the Jewish community and everybody else. You can't come in here. You know, there was a huge battle in the early body of Messiah between those of Jewish disposition and those of the Gentile. A whole fight about who can come in and how they can come in and whether they should come in. Because after all, you guys are out there. We're in here. We're covenanted. But that's why Paul has to keep saying, but just because you were circumcised doesn't mean that it guarantees anything. What matters is what you choose to do. What choices are you making? He says he has broken down the partition of the barrier. Now, there actually was a barrier in the temple that says no Gentiles beyond this point. Okay? That got broken down as well. And to completely, verse 16, so as to create himself one renewed man from the two, thus making peace. And to completely restore it to favor both of them unto Elohim in one body, through the stake having destroyed the enmity by it. There's an enmity that had happened between covenanted people and non-covenanted people, where there was not the ability to change from one to the other, to transition from one to the other. And he's trying to say, stop that nonsense. This was happening here in Ephesus. This was happening in Rome. It's all over the place. Paul's dealing with it all the time. He says, but he destroyed the enmity. He says, having come, he brought us the good news of peace to you who are far off and peace to those near. By the way, this is also talking to the scattered Israelites, saying, you were punished. You were out there. The phrase afar off is often referring to the dispersion. He says, but that enmity that was there, that goes back to when the prophecies where you're going to be scattered, he says, he's destroyed that enmity. He's made now the possibility to begin the regathering. He said, having come, he brought us that good news, because through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the set-apart ones and members of the household of Elohim, having been built upon the foundation of the emissaries and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building being joined together grows into a set-apart dwelling place in Yahweh, in whom you are also being built together into a dwelling of Elohim in the Spirit. Now, all of that's being said to say, hold on, you can't use verses like 14 and 15 and the abolishing to say, wait a minute, all of this bad stuff happened because we were in the flesh and we were without Elohim and we were without Messiah, without the Torah, and now the problem is fixed because we took the Torah part out of the mix, so everything you were doing is now fine. How do you get that? Well, because we didn't understand this part about the Torah and the dogma thing, and the church told us. But it isn't standing there in like an island by itself. Paul's already gone through this whole thing, that you once walked a certain way. And now you're going to tell me you can continue walking that way because the problem was the Torah? No, the problem was you walking that way, and now you get to choose because he made it possible for all to come in. That's the salvation. That's the good news. You can covenant. Of course, that was always available, but it wasn't promoted that way. Because you see Ruth do it, right? Ruth was a Moabitess, then she became an Israelite. So this is that good news. But you see, all through all of this, it's a heart issue. It's a heart issue. That hardness of heart. Well, I don't want them to, I don't like them. I don't want them coming in. They shouldn't be allowed to come in. Or a heart issue. I'm not good enough. Why would he let me in? There's all kinds of ways that we can kind of look at ourselves and look at other people. But he's saying, stop all that. He says, you were called and created in Messiah, this new thing, onto good works, so that you should then now go and walk in them. Now compare that to the previous thing, the lust of the flesh, doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind, we're children of wrath. See the contrast here? It's not contrasting do what Torah versus now free to do what you want and feel like the Spirit just leads you. He's saying that's already what you were doing, and it led into nothing. Suffering, pain, lack of peace. He's saying, but you know what? He's taken this thing that's going on, this animosity against the right way of doing things, which, by the way, is being fomented still by the church, to have an animosity against what we're supposed to be doing. And Yeshua is supposed to have died to put that to rest, not to cause it to happen. Can we start to see that? Let's end with it here. Let's pray. Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King. Father, we have so much learning to do. And it begins with the prayer that Paul put forth. Father, I agree with his prayer and will reiterate his prayer, that you would give all of us a spirit of wisdom and revelation in the knowledge of you, so that our eyes of our understanding would be enlightened, so that we would know what is the expectation of your calling, and that we would understand the riches that you've laid out before us. Father, we want to do this with our utmost. We want to trust. But we live in a world where all of our experiences and all of our backgrounds and all of everything that's happened to us has given us nothing but excuses not to trust, not to believe. We're fearful. We doubt. We have a hard time trusting. Father, help us to find those we can trust, those you have anointed, those who are representing you, so that we can learn to trust you through them. Father, we just thank you for your word, for the inspiration that it gives us, for the guidance that it gives us, for opening up our eyes and ears and minds and hearts to receive what you've put in your word. so that we can truly grow into the image of your Son. Father, we just want to thank you for all these things, submitting ourselves to you and asking that you would help us to have the strength to just say, hineni, here I am. To say, I want to be a part of the covenant. Whatever you say, I will do. Father, we thank you, and we ask all of this in the name of our Messiah, who we so much appreciate, all that he did for us. In his name we pray, Yeshua Meshikenu. Amen. Amen.